If you've ever stared at the first page of a brand new sketchbook and felt frozen, you're not alone. Even after filling over 60 sketchbooks, I still feel the same hesitation, as that blank page carries so much pressure. In this video, I'm sharing some of my own first pages and also my top 3 tips to help you get past that fear and just begin. I'll also be painting the first pages of 2 different sketchbooks, exploring 2 different ways to begin. Hi, I'm Omar. I'm an artist, food illustrator and educator. I have taught thousands of students over the years about watercolours, and over the last 10 years I've created first pages in sketchbooks. They are a huge part of both my personal and professional creative practice. But the first page of a sketchbook still makes me hesitate even now. It does carry a strange kind of pressure, and that's why I wanted to make this video, to talk honestly about what's behind that fear and to help you find the courage to make that first mark too. There's something about that first page. It feels like it has to carry the promise of everything that follows, as if it should set the tone for the entire sketchbook, and it should be beautiful and meaningful and intentional. We convince ourselves that it needs to be impressive or clever, and it has to reflect who we are as artists, whether we are trying to find our style or improve our ability with watercolour. So we want that first page, that first mark, to be just right. The truth is, this pressure isn't about the paper or the paint, it's about fear. That fear of not being good enough, the fear that we will mess it up and waste that page, or the fear that it's going to reveal somehow that we are not real artists after all. This is not a logical fear, it is emotional, and it probably gets louder when we see gorgeous sketchbook tools on Instagram or YouTube. There are incredibly beautiful spreads with tidy thumbnails and expressive pages that seem to have just fallen into place. We rarely see the hesitation, the scribbles or the torn out pages that people just skip past. But we often hold ourselves to these curated standards even without realizing it. And that myth that the first page needs to be perfect can stop us even before we start. But our sketchbooks are not galleries, they are playgrounds. They are meant for trying and failing and experimenting. The promise your first page should carry isn't perfection, it is permission. The permission to begin, the permission to explore and to keep going no matter how it starts. So if we know perfection isn't the goal, why do we still freeze? Sometimes it might be the sketchbook itself, because it's new and beautiful and maybe even expensive. It suddenly feels too precious to mess up, and we don't want to be wasting our good materials on something that might go wrong. Other times we tell ourselves that we're not ready, that we should wait for a better idea, or when we are feeling more confident. But confidence doesn't come before we start, it comes because we start. And then there's the inner critic, the voice that says, "Don't bother, it won't be any good." This is fear disguised as caution, and it makes us treat that one blank page like it's a test we have to pass. But a sketchbook isn't meant to prove anything. Now I want to show you a handful of my first pages from the last few years. I've never really shared all of these before because honestly they are not particularly amazing to look at, but that's kind of the point. It's not about impressing anybody. Looking back, I have noticed a few themes that keep showing up in these first pages, and I want to talk to you about those now. I think it's really important for you to see that my first pages of sketchbooks are nowhere near perfect. A lot of my pages begin with swatches, watercolours, inks, mixed media, coloured pencil, just seeing how they behave. So there's no subject or composition or pressure to make it look like anything. It's simply a way to get familiar with materials, loosen up my hand and ease into this particular sketchbook without expectations. Swatching shifts the focus away from the outcome and back to the process. Other times I really like to sketch faces. They are often of the people I am traveling with, like fellow workshop artists or my kids. And it's a way of grounding myself in the moment. There is something comforting about drawing someone that's familiar, and it gives that particular page meaning even if the drawing is quick or wonky. I am not aiming for any type of likeness or technical accuracy. It's really about connection between me and the people in the sketch, like my kids here, and it's just getting something down. There is really no pressure to impress. In tone sketchbooks such as these, I often lean into value studies, exploring light and shadow in the simplest way, and that mid-tone paper gives me a head start, so I don't have to start from absolute white, and that instantly takes a lot of pressure off. So I'm just using a dark coloured pencil or a white gel pen, pastel. I can focus on shape and contrast rather than colour or detail. So it becomes an exercise in seeing where the light falls, where the shadows are, without worrying about making anything that is very pretty. And sometimes I want to go a little bit bolder, fully experimental with collage and layered textures and mixed media to see what happens. It's really not about control, it is my undying curiosity. I like to try things I wouldn't normally do, especially if they feel a little bit unfamiliar, and there's something really liberating about starting a sketchbook page that breaks the rules, for me anyhow. And this sets the tone because this space is mine. And there is this one. The red acrylic marker exploded over this first page. It was completely unplanned and incredibly chaotic at the time, but instead of scrapping the page, I started responding to it, and I actually started swooshing this red colour everywhere on every other page. And this one incident actually led to a whole new way of working. Those random textures and gestural marks now show up in nearly every sketchbook I own, and that taught me that even the worst start can open up something new if you let it. If any of this is resonating with you, let me know in the comments what your first page fears are, or how you are learning to move through them. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. A while ago I did do another video about the fear of the first page, and in the comments quite a few people said something very interesting. They suggested that I should paint the first page last, and I really love that idea, and that's exactly what I have done here in this Pear's Secret sketchbook. I deliberately left the first page blank until the very end, so now I am coming back with a fresh perspective. Now that the rest of the sketchbook is filled with all kinds of experiments and mixed media, I feel like this is the right time to come back to this first page and fill it up with a completely different idea. I am painting on top of a jelly plate print with watercolour. The pigments I'm using are Schmincke Quin Purple and also their brilliant Opera Rose, and I was just going to take it from there and see what happened. I think one of the biggest things that holds us back is often we overthink. We have a tendency to want to plan everything out, to have the perfect idea and know that it is going to work out. That's what we hope for. But sketchbooks do not need masterpieces like this. They just need to add energy and movement. I have plenty of pages in this particular sketchbook that didn't really go anywhere. There were pretty decent ideas, but in reality, when they weren't inside my head but on the paper, it didn't quite work out as I thought. But every time I learned something new, and even when it didn't quite look as I thought it would, I could say to myself, well, I won't do that again. And this first page is not meant to sum up the whole sketchbook or to prove anything. It's just another moment in a much longer creative process. Sometimes I think it's really important to understand that we will have different ideas taking us in different directions, and they are tugging us towards different possibilities. Our ideas are not neat or linear, and they will never arrive fully formed. One moment it's a colour you want to try, next time it'll be shape or texture. You don't always have to know what's going on all the time. It's not until you start making that ideas may start forming, and that's okay. That is the nature of creative work. It is uncertain and it is tangled up, but it's also alive. What matters most is showing up. We should hold on to that curiosity, that playfulness, and just a bit of courage. Even if you only have 10 minutes and an idea that doesn't make sense yet, maybe further down the line it will. Perfectionism doesn't always have to look like obsessing over tiny details. Sometimes it shows up as procrastination, waiting for that perfect idea, or needing the right materials or pigments in order to make the perfect sketch. Or it could feel like over-editing, reworking a page so many times that it starts to lose its spark. Often it could simply be overwhelm. You may just have too many ideas and expectations with no clear place to begin. Sometimes it's all or nothing thinking, such as if it's not going to be amazing, why start at all? Or you could get stuck in the technical side where you are focusing so hard on precision or realism that you forget the joy of making marks just to explore. The truth is, the first page does not need to be a masterpiece. It just needs to start. It needs motion, that first scribble, that first odd colour choice, or the uncertain line, because that is what is going to lead to something real, something unexpected, something that you would not have arrived at if you had just kept thinking about it. I have had plenty of pages that did not turn out as I imagined, but even those minor failures taught me something. They moved me forward. They gave me information that I wouldn't have known before. Something about composition or palette choices. And yes, ideas are not neat or tidy. If you wait for everything to feel perfectly clear before you begin, you may be waiting forever. Now I'm going to take you through the second version of how I would fill up the first page of a new sketchbook. This is the Moleskine, and this had actually been hanging around for quite a few years, so I decided it was time to fill it up. If you've been following my work for a while, you know that I like to create textured backgrounds in the pages of my sketchbooks. On this occasion, I'm going to be using these chunky acrylic markers. They are Molotow and Liquitex. You saw I just scribbled that on, and I've used just plain water to extend that further, and I just grabbed that navy blue pen, and I'm going to do a few more pages so that you can see how I just put these on very randomly. A blank page often feels like it demands perfection, but once there is random colour or texture or marks, the pressure to make that perfect start disappears, or at least is lessened, and it's no longer a blank page. It is already a work in progress. So something is already there. You will not be starting from nothing. You will have to just react to this texture, and that shift makes it easier to begin because you're building on something rather than inventing something from scratch. And a textured background makes it feel a lot less precious. I'm going to be reserving this particular sketchbook just for octopus and other cephalopods, perhaps sea life as well. It is just something that I'm creating for myself, and I might not necessarily share it on Instagram or on YouTube even. I do explain a lot more about keeping a secret sketchbook in a previous video. I will link it in the description below. I am just researching the shape of this octopus. Yes, I am using all different colours as well, and it is not based in reality. Something else I want to say is the paper on the left is actually the end paper. It's not even watercolour paper, so that's something I often do as well that I wanted to point out. And I think I'm more likely to take risks and explore rather than freeze or overthink every decision. If it's already messy or abstract, it doesn't feel like there is something that you are going to ruin. You feel like you are not ready to make a real sketchbook page, prepping the backgrounds is a really productive and playful way to stay creatively engaged. It's really low pressure activity. That's why I do it, and I think for me it has built up a lot of momentum and gets me closer to creating work that is a lot more playful and free. The nib that I'm using is called the Kakimori, and it was gifted to me recently, and I really love using it. The quality of line is really phenomenal. Putting it over wet paint also gives amazing results. Now I'm using Derwent Inktense pencils. They're a little bit like watercolour pencils, so when they go over damp paper it creates all different types of effects. You can see I pressed a little bit too hard in that end paper and it went through, but I love the textures that these pencils are giving me right now. It is something that I want to definitely include a lot more of in future sketchbooks, and especially in this next secret sketchbook, because I want to include them for squid or maybe orca whales, who knows. Just wanted to point out again, this left hand side is actually the end paper, and I think this helps bypass that first page pressure, because there is no expectation that this should be beautiful, because it's not even watercolor paper. I'm just really stretching myself here with lots of scribbles, and that emotional pressure I think is definitely less. Marking this end paper with something spontaneous, I am claiming this sketchbook for myself. I'm saying this is my space and it's not something that needs outside approval. Something else that I really have to mention, because I don't think it is talked about enough, and it is being kind to ourselves when we are creating. It's not just a nice idea, it is really essential for our creative growth, because when we are gentle with ourselves, we are more likely to keep showing up for our art. And it's in that consistency, in that quiet momentum, that is going to help you build confidence over time. You may not feel inspired every day, and not every page is going to go the way you want, but if your inner voice says, hey, it's okay, we're going to try again, you are likely to return to your next blank page, and that is what matters most. If the first blank page of your sketchbook feels too daunting, I have 3 simple things that have really helped me, and they might help you too. My first tip is to skip the first page altogether. Turn over a few pages in and start where the pressure feels a lot lower. Once the sketchbook feels a little bit more lived in, it is often going to be easier to come back and fill that front page later without all that expectation attached. I have done this many times, as you saw, and it can be incredibly freeing. You are not breaking any rules that says that sketchbooks have to be filled from the front to back. It is your sketchbook and you get to use it however you like. My second tip is to start with a textured background. A clean white page can feel like it is demanding something really important, but if you soften that whiteness with just a little bit of texture or colour, it's going to become a lot easier to begin. I've got several videos on YouTube where you see me use inks or acrylic gouache, and you just saw me use acrylic markers earlier. And those sweeping brush marks and random abstract backgrounds in sketchbooks breaks the perfectionism of that page. It doesn't need to make sense. It's really about making the paper feel less pristine and less intimidating. You are not starting from nothing anymore, and you will be responding to something that is already there. And a third great tip is to use that first page for trying out colours and materials, swatches, colour mixing, brush sets, notes and observations. Treating this page like a warm-up or reference sheet shifts your mindset completely. So instead of seeing it as a piece to prove something, you are using that page to prepare for something, to get to know your tools, to loosen your hand, and to ease into that sketchbook without all that weight of expectation. If any of this has resonated with you, if you've ever stared at that blank page and felt some hesitation, I really want to hear about it. Let me know in the comments what your first page fears are, or how you have learnt to move through them. Your story might help someone else feel less alone. A big thank you to my Patreon community who make it possible for me to create videos like this. And if you want to be part of fun live painting sessions, sketchbook challenges, or just want some gentle encouragement, the link to my Patreon is in the description. If you've enjoyed this video, I would be so grateful if you left a thumbs up, as it really helps my channel to grow. And if you'd like more videos on sketchbook practice, loosening up, or building real creative confidence, then hit the subscribe button now. See you next time. Stay amazing.